Welcome back to everyone to Real Talk with the Sexperts. So good to see everyone, and I think I'm just
Yeah.
really feeling some warmth in my heart center right now, thinking about the community we're building, and really appreciative of everyone that continues to show up every month and share their time with us. So, for those of you that are here for the first time, we're really excited to have you. If you haven't heard of us, Real Talk is a live Q&A panel of certified therapists, coaches, and sexologists, sex educators, sex workers, sex positive professionals who are here to transform conversations around sex, relationships, love, dating, and modern intimacy. And it's driven by your questions. So no panel is the same, and we always have new panelists as well. So, as always, we'll be discussing the questions you've submitted in advance, and also you have free access to the chat. So, please, we invite you, we encourage you to share your thoughts, reactions, and questions along the way. We love a lively chat. We have Quill, who's also a fellow sexpert in the chat, who's been on the panel. So they'll be helping out with some answers and sharing, I'm sure, some helpful information as well. So we just love having you here. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Jamie Azar. I'm a certified sex relationship and intimacy coach and founder of Erotic Expressions, where I work with individuals and partners plus to dismantle shame, sociocultural pressure, and expectations around sex and relationships, help them reconnect with pleasure and improve relationship satisfaction. So I'd love to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll dive right into the conversation because we have, I think, over 20 questions or more to discuss tonight. So we have a lot to get through in a really great way, and I'm excited for the conversation. So we'll have Lacey, Wayne, Sasha, Jerry, and Brandy, and I'll throw that order in the chat for you. So feel free to jump in and give us your introductions.
Awesome. I'm Lacey Bond. I go by Intimacy Lacey on the internets, including TikTok and Instagram. I am a certified sex relationship and intimacy coach as well, which is how I met the wonderful human that is Jamie. I focus on kink, polyamory, and purity culture, not in that order. Most of the folks I work with are purity survivors. That is my background. My Biola University degree is hidden behind me. So I tend to approach things from a very religious trauma informed lens.
Yay. All right, Lacey. Hello, everybody. I'm Wayne Lassane. I am a sex intimacy relationship coach as well. I also run and co-founded Shades of Non-Monogamy. And so, yes, I specialize in all things non-monogamy as well as just unlearning a lot of things that don't really support us today in today's relationships. Yeah, so I kind of felt like myself, I kind of find myself leaning more towards a radical aspect of relationships than that. So, yeah.
Got you. I'm Sasha Thomas. I am also a sex and relationship coach, specializing more in non-monogamy. I'm a non-monogamous slash polyamorous wife, lover, friend, um, and specializing in people that are interested in redefining their life in their kind of later and second stage of life.
I love that.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry St. Louis. I'm not from St. Louis. I'm from a far worse place. I'm from Florida. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker and certified sex therapist and educator. I am also a free spirit, so I am very open to all things. So I work with a lot of people. I'm working on increasing the number of sex workers that I work with in my clinical practice. And I'm also growing my practice right now. I am also a co-host of a podcast called The Queer and Kinky Couch. Please check it out if you get a moment. The populations that I work with are Black queer individuals and people with disabilities, queer people with disabilities specifically. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for letting me be here.
Hi, I'm Brandy, and I'm the founder of Brandy Kink, Dismantling Our Internalized Slut Shame. I advocate for individuals that have disabilities in finding your ability within your disability in your sex life. I am also an advocate for, sorry, I got mixed up. I'm also an advocate for dismantling your internalized slut shame, your internalized white supremacy, and your internalized misogyny. So a lot of the work I do is about finding who you are outside of all these things that we've been taught since we were really young. So, yes, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you all so much. And we're happy to have you all. I love it. It's one of my favorite panelists here tonight. So, all right, let's get into this. So, Our first question that was submitted, the person wants us to debunk the myth that relationships must be exclusive.
Mhm.
How many polyamory educators do we have on this panel? At least three. Like solid. Uh, I think I had marked my name on this one. I mean, yeah, no, not true. Most of our American society does have a very monogamous script and expectation for relationships, which is a colonial thing that the Puritans brought over, as they did with so many wonderful things that have propagated over the last 400 years, resulting in America's extremely dysfunctional relationship with sexuality and relationships.
Mhm.
Um, but non-monogamy has a very long and storied tradition around the world. I think Wayne's probably, yeah, Wayne is the guy to talk about this. You got your hand up. I'm gonna toss it over to you.
Yes.
I was just gonna say that I have a saying that more people in non-monogamous relationships, whether they know it or not, right?
Mhm.
We all know people who are either cheating or being cheated on, right? And so and so this is the reality of where we are today. So we know that monogamy is not working. We can see it in all the things, even though the media tries to cattle everybody into monogamy through all the social media, through the music,
Mhm.
through television shows. Hallmark cards, all the things, right? At the same time, we are out here. We see what's going on, So for me, I really don't, I've thought this for the longest time, and I don't believe monogamy is natural. I think that I think that some people can actually be good at monogamy. I don't think the majority of us are good at monogamy. Again, just look at the statistics in marriage and relationships. Today most people are in popcorn relationships, right? A year, maybe a year and a half, and that's a long-term relationship. So yeah.
Yeah, Brandy, what would you add to that? We're definitely, Lacey's kind of acknowledged compulsory monogamy, the roots of colonialization, right, that have kind of invisibilized non-monogamy. Wayne has, right, also kind of given a head nod to the invisibilization, underrepresentation of people who are non-monogamous, but also the very right real possibility and like living reality that so many people right have right now in their lives and in their
Mhm.
relationships of different structures outside of the defaults of monogamy. Brandy, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so personally, I would say on the topic of exclusivity, right, which is what we're asking, when it comes to that, I think the stigma behind different dynamics and relationships cause us to make assumptions when we're entering relationships.
Mhm.
So we automatically assume we are two people in a relationship, and this counts as cheating. But none of that was ever discussed because we are so embedded in the way we are taught to think that these assumptions are made, not even realizing that this person could have completely debunked all of that in their in their own life. And I think that the topics of exclusivity and like what counts as cheating and what terminology are we going to use to define what we are does actually need to happen. That conversation, people say, well, we should just know if we're going on dates, then we're obviously together. That's not the reality anymore. I go on dates with my friend all the time. Does that mean I'm going to marry her? No. Am I still bringing her flowers? Yes. But it doesn't mean anything. So I think we need to stop just making assumptions because the world is not what it used to be.
Yeah. Really quick, also, yeah, thank you for that, Brandy. I always encourage everybody to kind of like do some self-reflection for themselves. To kind of, there's all kind of, I created one myself, but there's worksheets out here or program. I mean, like tests you can take to see just where you're leaning at. Are you leaning
Mhm.
monogamous, non-monogamous, monogamish? Like where are you at? And so that way, when you go into a relationship, because I think that what's happening today is that a lot of people aren't honest in where they are as far as relating goes. And so they go into these relationships acting like they're monogamous when they're not, right? Which is manipulative, it's not honest. And so it's just like trying to figure out for yourself where you are. And you can change, right? You can change next month, next year, but just trying to figure out where you are. If I'm leaning more monogamish today or am I leaning non-monogamous today, then that's where I'm at. So when I'm dating, I should tell people that when up front, So yeah. And I think that to Brandy's point, I think that a lot of us have these expectations that we are in unspoken exclusivity and then we're disappointed when we find out that's not it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all helpful, and just to define the expectations I'm hearing from you all, the importance to one, acknowledge that there's a lot of default and assumptions wrapped up in mononormativity and monogamy, right? And there can be more conscious ways to enter into monogamy, right? And maybe applying some of these frameworks we find in non-monogamy for making agreements and negotiation more explicit. But yeah, what I'm hearing is, right, be careful not to assume exclusivity, and do not assume that that's either sexual exclusivity, romantic exclusivity, emotional exclusivity. Do not necessarily assume that sex and exclusivity go hand in hand for everyone, right? So kind of make these conversations more transparent, make the invisible visible, make the implied explicit. Yeah. I hear from the chat people saying cheating equals breaking the boundaries that have been discussed and agreed upon in that specific relationship. Yeah. So even making our definitions of cheating explicit, whether we're in
Right.
monogamous or non monogamous relationships. Absolutely. Good.
Mhm.
All right. Anything coming up for anyone else? Hands up in the chat. All right. So, our next question that was submitted, someone had asked us about lesbian bed death, and wants us to kind of unpack and debunk the myth of a lesbian bed death. Is this a new term for folks? If so, feel free to share in the chat. For people that have not heard the term, generally, lesbian bed death, it was coined by a couple sexologists. Pepper Schwartz was one of them. The other person, I don't remember their name, but it generally refers to the waning, diminished, or non existent sexual attraction or relationship in women loving women or lesbian relationships, right? And so we know that the truth of this is that a flatlined erotic connection can happen across all sexual orientations, not just in women loving women relationships or lesbian relationships. And that's okay, like not to villainize that, not to stigmatize. But the truth is that this can happen across all erotic, right, relationships, sexual orientations. BDE Moves, Whitney Miller. If you follow them on Instagram,
Yeah.
yes, Lacey's like, yes. A few of you are like, yes. They talk a lot about this, and I recommend checking out their page. They talk about a caretaker trap that can happen in lesbian
Mhm.
relationships where relationships become too safe, like touch becomes too domesticated, which can kind of override eroticism. Initiation can become difficult. There can be merging in a relationship, not enough differentiation. But again, we know that can happen in a lot of different relationships as
Mhm.
well. So it's not a terminal diagnosis, it's not an inevitability.
Right.
And a lot of women can be happy in relationships where they're not having sex, excluding sexual intimacy. So also to normalize that, and that like there doesn't have to be sex for,
Mhm.
emotional fulfillment or connection as well. Brandy, what's coming
Yes.
up for you? And Wayne, I see a hand too.
Well, just piggybacking off of what you're saying in comparison to any other type of relationship, because in reality, it's like any other type of relationship, despite it being two females, right? I think there's a common misconception that we are going to love our partners 24/7. And that's just not true. Our partners are going to annoy us. Spending that much time with one singular person is going to annoy us. So, yes, that sexual tension is going to rise and fall regardless of where you are on the spectrum of sexuality. And there's even going to be moments, I know I've personally faced this, where I even thought I was asexual. Me, the
Mhm.
sexual being that I am, have had those moments because it's natural. You're going to drift up and down. You have to
Right.
remember that you have your own personal hormones for your own personal life. Monetary stress is a thing, life stress is a thing, school, work,
Mhm.
all of those things change this chemical balance that is going to dictate your sexual drive. But again, you're not always going to like your partner. And sometimes they're not even going to be what you're physically attracted to. That is also normal. It does
Mhm.
not mean you don't love them any less. It does not make them no longer worthy of your body or you sexually. It just means that you're in a stump. But like most stumps, we just pop it right out and we plant a new tree. That's all it is.
Yeah, and Wayne, Sasha, what's coming up for you? Thanks, Brandy, for highlighting their like solutions too for that, like prioritizing intimacy, prioritizing that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Esparel talks about this as well. She talks about how when we're lifing together, it's killer of desire and romance, right? Because
Mhm.
we have all these responsibilities. So you were speaking to this already, Brandy. You were just speaking to
Yeah.
this now. Yeah. So if you don't know who Esparel is, please go check her out. But she talks about this all the time. Well, and also that in fact that like a lot of times we have to again look within ourselves and see how we show up in a relationship, right? Because when we're outside of the house and we're working all day or whatever, we're giving our best selves, and so by the time we come home, we don't have much left. So really, how are we showing up at home? That's a question for ourselves because she also talks about how, the person who we live with, who are lifing together, they sometimes get the worst part of us because we're
Mhm.
drained and we don't have a lot of energy. So again, just
Yes.
when we have these kind of questions, I always say look within ourselves first and see how we're showing up. And then even then that helps us to be curious with our partner, right? Ask our partner what's going on with them and how they're showing up as well. So these are just some things I kind of like think about when I'm hearing these type of questions. So yeah, or come up for me rather.
Yeah, Sasha, Jerry, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, I think what's coming up for me is just the thought that women should always have this consistent, spontaneous sexual desire. You have to remember that a lot of that comes from male-centric, models of sexuality, and our response to sexuality is very different than male patterns. And so even though, we're two women together, the conditioning of cultural conditioning in society just kind of puts those same ideals on our situation in our bedroom and our sex life. And just like Wayne was saying, like social media and advertising, it all reinforces that. But a lot of times we have to remember that where these models and ideas are coming from. And like Brandy said, a lot of us together as women, we got mood changes, we have life changes that affect. And then I'm going into other things because I do a lot with peri and menopausal women. Sometimes when you're just not feeling good, and some women are in those stages of life together.
$100.
Neither one of them are feeling well. And if you don't feel well, you just don't have the sexual desire sometimes. And so, sometimes I think about like, is this really a male model that I'm living in to dictate what my sexual desire and spontaneity should be?
100% and compulsory
Yeah. And
sexuality.
yes.
Yeah, Jerry, what would you add?
What I wanted to add was like about low desire. It doesn't, I
Mhm,
like to think of sexuality and sexual desire of like as a spectrum.
mhm,
I don't think that it has to be one thing or another, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, something is wrong. I think that, life just happens, and desire goes up and down. And I think there
mhm.
needs to be understanding that it's natural. And I also want to point out that asexuality exists too. Does that mean that there's something wrong because people don't desire sex? No. I don't think the real issue is desire. I think it's the pressure and the shame that we attach to it.
100% that. Yeah, I love it. Let's move on to the next question because we're talking about like compulsory sexuality and sex.
Mhm.
And one person asked us, what activities or interactions count as sex? So, like, what is
Mm.
sex? What activities or interactions count as sex? And someone else had asked, does oral sex count as real sex? Which kind of, I think those two kind of go hand in hand in some way. So let's kind of talk about both. Yeah, Brandy, Wayne, what's coming up for you guys?
This is one of my favorite topics
Mhm.
because I love advocating for people that may have a disability. And non able bodied individuals can experience sex in a variety of ways, just like we can experience sex in a variety of ways. So I love telling people and reminding them that sex is exactly what you make it. And me personally, I even count masturbation as I have sex with myself. I say it all the time, like, oh my God, I slept with myself last night. I was amazing. I say it all the time. Phone sex, same thing. To me, sex is just any moment of vulnerability that you climax. It could be just laying in bed with somebody and mutual masturbation. You could be over the phone, literally countries away. You could just be doing it yourself in the mirror. I think all of that is sex. Is my definition your definition? No, it doesn't have to be. But I just want to emphasize that it is such a broad thing that you can decide for yourself what counts as sex. However, I know that there's like a downfall to that because then it comes to like, well, if I'm saying I had sex with this person, but they don't want to say that, okay, so we have different definitions of sex. At that point, I do suggest then talking with that person, like, okay, well, what do you feel transpired here? And what are you comfortable with us saying happened? Because that, again, everything has a good side and a bad side. That would be the bad side of that.
Yeah, Wayne, Lacey, like what activities, interactions count as sex for you? Does oral sex count as real sex? What would you say to the folks who submitted this question?
Wayne, do you want me? Are you muted? Do you want me to go? Wayne, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I'll say that Brandy always lead into what I was gonna say, so we're on the same mindset. We're on the same wavelength there. I was gonna say, like, yeah, figuring out first of all, what does sex mean to you? First and foremost, right? It's like, what is sex to you? Like, sex can be so many different things for one person till there's another. I remember one time me and Melissa, we created a list of what is sexual, right? Like, is sexual this, is sexual that. And some of the things that we came up with were completely opposite of one another, right? So just figuring out what is sexual for you. I think that's the starting point for you. Yeah. Go ahead, Lacey.
I was trying to find a picture of a whiteboard that I had actually done to fuck with a partner of mine because we were talking about like foreplay versus sex, um, and kind of started going into because this is very subjective. I mean, I don't think it should be. I think more people should think the way I do, but that's just me. Foreplay versus sex, and I made two columns. I was like, this is your list of what is and isn't sex. It's very serious. Um, and I was like, okay, is oral sex sex or foreplay? And they were like, foreplay. I'm like, okay, what if you're a lesbian? And I was like, is anal rimming foreplay or sex? Is anal sex foreplay or sex? Like, and kind of just like was going through all these various acts that, as a cis straight man, this person like had very like kind of clear delineations of like anything that was not PIV penetrative sex was foreplay, which is pretty common, and it is kind of hard to draw the distinction of like what is and isn't foreplay sometimes. I love that, Andre. Sex is an activity that allows for pleasure. Because basically I just went like this whole list and basically just broke this guy's brain where he was just like, but if that's sex, then what? I'm like, also sex. That thing you're about to ask, also sex, IMO. An activity that
Yeah.
allows for pleasure, an activity where you orgasm. Like there is plenty of sex where like you don't come and it's not always the focus. But like an activity like that allows for or is focused on sexual pleasure, um, in the genital zones is sex to me. Like fingering is digital sex. Like anal sex, digital sex, or anal sex is sex. You're fucking an area. Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's just like very like deconstructivist.
I think it's really interesting just even listening. Like, we asked people in the chat, what is your definition, right? Sex is an activity that allows for pleasure. Like, Lacey, you shared your definition. Brandy, you shared yours. And yeah, other people are saying I feel like it's an ever-changing definition depending on partner, time of life. I know I was trying to work out my definition as well, and it's like we do all have different definitions. And I think for me, when I read this question, it's like behind it is really what I'm hearing or feeling is like, not I, but like, do we have the permission to define sex outside of penetration, climax, and penis and vagina, really? My answer to that question would be absolutely. And I think it's way more fun if we do it like that and can start expanding our very generally narrow definitions of sex too. So, what I'm hearing is not only we have different definitions, but it's important to have a conversation around it, maybe, or if you have a chance to, is talking about what it means to the people you're about to have it with, right? And seeing if your definitions land or not. And either way, it sounds like pleasure is kind of the goal for most people, and climax isn't necessarily essential. And yeah, and people are saying in the chat, sex is not only about genitalia. Like, absolutely. I think these are some of the myths, we're busting here, right? It's not about genitalia, it's not about orgasm, climax, penetration. I mean, I think we've done this experiment in the past, but like, what's one word? And I'll do it right now if you feel playful. Like, what's one word that comes to mind when you think of sex? I'll put mine on in the chat right now. Play, right? Like, pleasure, exactly. Like, go ahead, keep throwing them in there in the chat. Giggle, yeah, fun, right? Again, like the definitions and connotations, think about great sexual experiences you've had in the past. Is orgasm necessarily the first thing that comes to mind? Might be, or penetration, right? And for some people it might, for others it might not be, but fun little experiment. All right, so our next person asked about polyamory. They want to hear more about polyamory. So let's try to make this a little more specific. Like, what are some of the myths or stigmas we've heard about polyamory, and what's really true?
I like to go.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha.
I think a big myth and about it is that um, you have to have multiple partners in to be polyamorous. You have to have multiple partners, and if you don't have these multiple partners, then you're not people like to use that term. You're not polying right. And that's a big myth because you can have one partner and really identify as polyamorous or non-monogamous, and just the ability to be able to communicate that with your partner and the ability to be able to express love and desire as someone else if it were to come about. That's it. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there of what it is, and a lot of people try to put these strict labels on what polyamory is. And so for me, it really is about, how you like to do it, and how you like your love style to be. And it's ever changing. So there's not going to ever be one way. Just like everyone has sex a different way. And just like we said in the chat, label it differently. We label love differently as well. And so I think one of the big misconceptions is that you have to have a partner, because there's been plenty of times when my husband passed, I didn't have a partner for a while, but that didn't mean I was less polyamorous than anyone else. And so that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I've run into.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really helpful and
Yeah.
validating for folks to know that I don't have to be in a relationship, a polyamorous relationship, or have multiple partners to identify as polyamorous or non-monogamous. Yeah, Lacey, Brandy, what comes up for you?
Yeah. A big one that I see or hear a lot is that poly is just an excuse to cheat, and that it's like a free for all and you can kind of do whatever. And there are definitely fuckboys who claim to be polyamorous and do that, but people in polyamorous and ethically non-monogamous arrangements generally have more clearly defined rules and agreements and expectations. Like, I don't want to necessarily rules, but like boundaries and agreements where like things have been negotiated, and like there is cheating in polyamory. Um, it's breaking an agreement that you've made. And those agreements tend to be more explicit than the ones that show up in monogamy, in mononormative relationships, because like that's the dominant social framework and script. So when you're polyamorous, you're dealing with a lot more moving pieces and you have to keep track of a lot of things. A lot of us are very nerdy about it. A lot of us are very good at using Google Calendar as well. And it's not just like an excuse to be free for all. Like, it's healthy, ethical non-monogamy is predicated on respect for everyone's agency, autonomy, bodily sovereignty, transparency, openness, communication, which are all things that any healthy relationship should have, regardless of whether it's monogamous or not. But when you're dealing with something that's outside the social script, that is one of the things that I think differentiates it from monogamy, is that it is like these tend to be like very explicit, in a way that monogamy, should do, but doesn't always. Because I forget who was saying this earlier. Like, what does cheating mean to you? That should come up in any relationship because people have different definitions of it. I mean, I come from the Christian world. Like, you can't even like talk to a man in some cases, or like develop a close friendship with a man, or like look at a girl's Instagram if like you're of the opposite gender. So like expectations and explicitness, not a free for all.
Right. And not a sexual free for all either. Absolutely. And where
No,
sex isn't
bro, we
necessarily a
test.
mandatory requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, we test so much in this community. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate
Brandy,
it.
Sasha, like what would you guys add to that? Or what other myth might you bust around polyamory?
Mine is actually a combination of Sasha's and Lacey's. And I was just going to say that if it feels right to you, then your polyamorous dynamic is valid. Meaning, if you have structured in a way that you and your partner and or partners, because again, you don't have to have multiple partners. If you consider yourself polyamorous, you're polyamorous, you know? But if you and your partner and partners have discussed, have set up the rules, have set up, I'm okay with this, we're okay with this, I understand this is what you need, and I can't give it to you. I get that. If that is all set up, and it works for you and everyone's being respected, and like Lacey said, autonomy is being respected, and you are giving consideration to your partner and or partners, then your dynamic is valid. There is not a right way to be polyamorous. There
Mm-hmm.
just is. There's not like a picture, like a cookie cutter, like this is what poly is. It is an umbrella term, and there are so many variations of it. I myself am a relationship anarchist. I don't have partners, but I will have multiple partners on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a form of poly.
Yeah. And like one person had asked, is non-monogamy a choice? What would you guys say to that?
For some people, and I think for some people it is very much like an intrinsic part of like personality or orientation, if you want to call it that.
So that was actually a really big opinion that I had during one of our chats, one of our phone calls, that I personally feel like being non-monogamous and being ENM, CNM, it is a part of your intersectional identity. I don't think that somebody who is not naturally this will find fulfillment in just practicing it or doing it to keep a partner or doing it because they want to try it. I don't think you will find fulfillment in it if you are not naturally it. Does that mean that's exactly what it is? No. If you want to practice it because you're curious, obviously you can. If it fulfills you, that's wonderful. This is just a personal opinion of mine.
It's kind of like the Kinsey scale.
Yeah, so two different perspectives on that topic. Hearing it can be a spectrum, it can be
Mhm.
an innate orientation or identity. For others, it may be more of a lifestyle, right? Like maybe if it
Mhm.
comes to swinging, for example, or kind of an occasional stepping out of a monogamous relationship. But then even that, some people might consider that monogamous or under the realm of non-monogamy. So
Sure.
we do have a question in the chat I want to address in response to, I think, Brandy, something you said. They had asked, what happens when the consideration is asked for but becomes the deal breaker by the partner asked? And feel free to elaborate in the chat what this is pertaining to, but I'm imagining it's around relational agreements. Like what happens when what you're asking for, what happens when the consideration is asked for but becomes the deal breaker by the partner being asked?
I would want to know an example just so we can gauge the severity of what the deal break is in context, only because, like Lacey said, people think you can't cheat in polyamory. Yes, you absolutely can. Yes, you can. It
Yeah.
is completely possible. But if that's not what you mean, and you mean more consideration to you scheduled 2 dates this week and I haven't even had one, then that's a common thing that happens, which is why we brought up the Google Calendar becomes a really big thing in polyamorous relationships, so that you do pay respect to everyone's autonomy to be able to, enjoy the lifestyle that they're trying to cultivate with you.
Hmm. Yeah, and we don't have the specifics behind that question. Feel free to elaborate, but I'd question maybe the role of negotiation here, compromise. Again, what are hard limits for you, soft limits? Like what are we willing to again negotiate in the relationship and not? And then what might just be a difference in values and perhaps maybe someone that we're not meant to be in a relationship with long term, or might modify the structure of the relationship or agreements in some way to fit everyone's needs. Yeah. Sasha, what's coming up for you? Lacey, then we're going to get into the next question.
I think you kind of said it already, Jamie, is I was gonna put the hard stuff out there is, sometimes there you come to the realization that those hard no's are time now to reevaluate if this is a relationship that's good for you to be in, and healthy for you. And comfortable for you. So that's the tough part about it in all relationships. It doesn't have anything to do with non-monogamy, and polyamory. Sometimes, the relationship does not serve you, does not fit. And that's the time to evaluate it when there's these hard no's that really challenge some of the desires and needs that you need in a relationship to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wayne.
I just wanted to add to kind of like the
Time.
same thing that kind of Sasha touched on in a way. Like I think that sometimes a lot of times what people do is when they're in these non-monogamous relationships, they try to bring in the monogamous ideology with them and it doesn't work. It's like oil and water. And so we got to again check in with ourselves and see, are we trying to apply things that worked for us in monogamy into this non-monogamous relationship? Because if that's the case, it's going to be it can be problematic, So yeah.
And can I say one more thing? Oh, I think one more thing on what Wayne was saying is a lot of times too, I know I don't want to say like, oh, we'll break up if it doesn't work. Another special thing about non-monogamy is that you can redefine your dynamics. It doesn't mean that you have to just be without that person and we're breaking up. That's a very, more monogamous way of thinking, as if things don't fit and don't work, then that's the end of the relationship. But the beautiful thing of non-monogamy is you can change the dynamic and shift the dynamic of the relationship, and the things that work. And if they work beautifully, there's ways and techniques and to get around that, to preserve the good stuff. Right.
Yeah. That's that monogamy hangover.
Yeah.
Monogamy hangover is real.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
I
Yeah,
had like
Lacey.
one. Yeah. Um, I've had a situation kind of like this where it's like there's like a big issue, a big item that like one person thinks like really wants or is asked for and is kind of diametrically opposed to the values that another person has. And in that situation, the conversation was very functional. It actually became around like, okay, like what is the need for you that is coming behind this ask? Like, what do you think like getting this to happen like will do for you? I want to understand like your needs, your thought frameworks around it. Like, let's look at all the ways we could fulfill this need for you. Is hierarchy the thing that'll fulfill the need, or is there another need for like connection or more time or whatever that is driving that request, or like an insecurity that could be supported in another way?
I love that, Lacey. And yeah, like on the other side of that is like what is also maybe behind the person's resistance, right? Like not that you should have to negotiate, yeah, like compromise on your values, but right, maybe behind the
Yeah.
resistance is fear or insecurity, or again, a place for growth for that person as well. Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So we got another question submitted, and this is about physical intimacy. And this person is wanting us to discuss the idea that waiting before physical intimacy is a form of self-respect. Is that true? Waiting before physical intimacy is a form of self-respect. Yeah, Jerry, thanks.
Where's my hand raised?
Yeah, hi, everyone. As a self-respecting whore, no, I'm just like, but
Wait, I didn't hear what you said. I missed the joke.
as a self-respecting whore,
Oh, yeah, good.
but no. Well, I guess I am. I also think that that's a spectrum. I think that if that's what a person believes in, that should be your belief in you. And if I don't think that you should project it onto people, but if that is a desire that you want, then that should be the people that you search for. So I don't think that you need to wait or anything. There's people who have had sex the first day with their partner, and they're in a relationship, and there's people who have waited, and those relationships have ended or, gone down the drain in one way or another. Just my thought or belief.
So it's a form of self-respect if that's your definition and your value that you genuinely uphold yourself for some intentional reason too.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Brandy, Wayne, yeah.
So much like Jerry, I describe myself as an ethical slut because I will sleep with you on the first date, but I'm also tested and I've made sure that like I was prepared to make that decision. But I guess what I mean to say is like there is nothing wrong with allowing your body to dictate what you want in that moment. That doesn't mean that that's what you should go out and do. It means if that's what you want to do, you're more than welcome to do it. But you have to verbalize that need. There will be moments where you feel like maybe you're being too much. There will be moments where you feel like you're forcing yourself on somebody, or you're like initiating too often, or maybe you talk about sex too much. That those emotions need what is known as aftercare. To remind yourself that you're a human being, every human has needs, and it is okay to verbalize to someone that you're interested in, hi, I am interested in you physically. Is that something you're also interested in? Would you maybe want to do that with no expectation and or anything else that we need to discuss? That's an okay conversation to have. What is not okay, much like what Jerry said, is to shame somebody for feeling that way. If you want to wait, you can wait. If you don't want to wait, you don't have to wait.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between like Jerry's saying is this is my value, this is my definition of self-respect, this is my choice, and I have a reason for it. Whereas Brandy, like what you're saying is it might be rooted out of shame, right? And then there also might be like all of these right around a woman initiating or any gender initiating, right? Or am I deserving of this? Or I'm supposed to wait because that's born out of puritanical views of abstinence or whatever, right? Yeah, like whose script is it? Like Wayne, what would you add to this?
Yeah, and I was going to just add to like again, and I know that a lot of women hesitate to be physical because of patriarchy in itself, right? And I think that my thing is that whatever you're feeling, for you, just go along with it. Chris Donahue talks about it. He says that like in a relationship, if you the one thing he said, I can fix any. He said, I feel like I can almost fix anything when it comes to a relationship, except for if you've been together for a year or 6 months, whatever, and then you just had sex and sex is bad, I can't fix it, right? So if I may want to know right away if we're sexually compatible or not, because I don't want to be in a relationship for you for 6 months or a year and just to find out we're not sexually compatible. That would suck, right? For many reasons. So yeah, let me figure out if we're sexually compatible or not. That's just for me. Yeah.
Yeah, ditch the scripts. I don't know. There was always a script. I don't know if you guys heard it, but like when I was younger growing up, it was like, don't sleep with anyone until the third date or whatever. I don't know, like stuff like that, right? It's like, hey, okay, is that like informing my decision to wait, right? Or can I give myself permission to like unpack this ridiculous rule that has no grounding and fuck when I want to?
And it makes
Or not, right? Or not. But
you know what? In all
yeah,
honesty,
Jerry,
what
what's coming up? Jerry, what's coming up for you? Is that an old hand or new hand?
Oh, it's a new hand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
I wanted to say crap, I forgot the last thing I was gonna say. But the when you said something I wanted to also piggyback on, you talk about women it is a there are women who are being who are told like to wait because it makes you less loose. I like a loose woman. But also in the queer world and in the gay world, people who receive more bottoms, who receive more, are told the same thing. Like you are also told, oh, you shouldn't have sex with a certain amount of people because then you're seen as a loose bottom. And I'm think as a top, like we don't see that the same kind of dynamic. It's kind of like it's likened to straight people. And I could never subscribe to that because I'm just kind of like, I'm going to fuck who I want to fuck or get fucked by. And you're not going to tell me nothing else about that. If who I have had sex with weighs that much on you, that's your problem, not mine. Don't date me. But I feel like there's a lot of shame and stigma put on, I guess people who receive penetration or who are on that side of penetration as if like it makes you less of I don't know, a valuable partner than somebody else.
Jerry, I'm sorry, jumping really quick. You know what's so crazy about that is that I've always said like, you want to have sex, but you want to shame people who have sex. That is crazy. How does that make sense? Like logically, like I'm going to shame you for having multiple sexual partners, but yet and still I want to have sex. So then if those people aren't having sex with me, then who am I having sex with?
You can throw that shame, honey. I'm gonna get fucked over here.
Lacey, what would you add? And Brandy, and then we'll hop to the next question. Yeah.
As I just continue screaming in purity culture, like what you're saying, Wayne, about like I don't want to, like I wouldn't want to date someone for like 6 to 12 months, and, like not have sex and not know like that we're compatible. This is why so many Christian marriages fail. Like because we're like stay virgins until we get married and are told we can't do anything with ourselves or with anyone else. And then like you're supposed to magically flip a switch and like have a functional sex life with a spouse you've never even like done hand stuff with. Or maybe you're Mormon and you had anal sex but not vaginal because that's not the same, and that's okay for some reason. But like just like all of this, I'm just like I don't even have like a strong articulate point. I was just like this idea is so prevalent, and it's like I have not sussed out yet like the most effective way to help bring people to the understanding like it's okay to have your own sexual ethic. Erica Smith, who like just came out with a book on this, has like a really great like developing your personal sexual ethic workbook that I have not done yet. But like I'm gonna, just because I want to go through the process, because like just like knowing that you can is a really big piece for a lot of people, because I deal with and see stuff from purity culture survivors that just they might know in their head that it's okay, but they're still so weighed down by the shame. And so like the process of developing your own sexual ethic, whether or not you come from a religious purity culture or not, is very valuable, and really does help with the shame around sex and the moralizing and the association between sexuality and sexual activity and self-respect.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. Thanks, Lacey. Good. All right. Our next question is about threesomes. So this person is wondering, how do you ask for a threesome without being disrespectful to anyone? How do you ask for a threesome without being disrespectful to anyone? Yeah, Brandy, what comes up for you?
So, as somebody who has been a unicorn for a lot of her life, I absolutely love questions like this. So, as a unicorn, I prefer personally to be approached by the more feminine side of the relationship. And I say that because there tends to be that masculine feminine energy, despite whether it's a male or female, there's always that energy. Now, normally when it's two females, I do appreciate when they both approach me. If it is a male and a female, I appreciate that the female approach me because I go off of like party rules. The female approaches, we discuss hand in hand while the male sits and listens. That's my preference personally. I also do like to be courted. If I am not getting breakfast in bed the next morning, I will be upset and I probably won't come back. So we are not disposable people. Please do not treat us that way. Even if we're not a part of your dynamic, please do not treat us like we are a disposable sex toy. We are people. We deserve to be courted. We deserve to be flirted with, taken on a date, because that's going to build that right there, that date, that chit chat. That's the foreplay. And that's going to make it a little more comfortable. Not just that, but just developing a sense of like who we are as people matters. We're not just going to hop into bed with you, but that's just me as a unicorn. That's my personal preference. So coming from the other side of things, that's how I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your kind of personal preference there, Brandy, and the reclamation of the term unicorn. Like I know it can be a derogatory term, and many single folks who are engaging with couples, right, can meet a lot of objectification, right, and triangulation and disrespect through that. So thank you for acknowledging that as well. Yeah, Wayne, Lacey, what's coming up for you? How to ask for a
Uh,
threesome without being disrespectful?
Yeah, yeah. Again, just me, always being curious. Like maybe even watch a video podcast and just kind of be ask questions around like, hey, would you be open to this? What do you think about this? How do you feel about it? And just kind of like bring it up in a way that where it's an honest discussion. And I would say as the person who's being asked, making sure that you're, again, just really understanding where you are with things because Brandy brought some great points. You talk about this thing called what is I can't think of it now. It's where the couple is the priority. What Sasha? What is
Couple
it called?
Couple
privilege.
Couples privilege.
centrism.
Yeah,
Couple
couples
centrism.
privilege. Now, couples privilege. Yes,
Oh, couple
right. So
privilege.
where, yeah. So when someone's coming in, they feel like the outsider. So it's just like really understanding like what is it you're asking of somebody. What is your intentions with this? Is there just a toy? Are they and then say that. Be honest about that because that's what so they can agree to not to agree whatever they want to do, right? And then also just again, just like being like really, I would say just like what's the word I'm looking for? Just honest with what you're asking your partner. Like, are you asking your partner because you like somebody else, or you're trying to bring them in, because, or you're asking them so you guys can experience something together? Like, all these things matter, right? So make sure you know your intentions before you go even to ask your partner whatever you're trying to ask them for, and be open to your partner asking you for the same thing on the other side, right? So ask yourself if you're open to that, because if you aren't open to your partner wanting the same thing you want, because most likely your partner wants the same thing you want. So if you want a threesome with two women, or your partner wants a threesome with two men, and vice versa. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, Lacey, Sasha, what would you add? Thanks, Wayne. That's helpful.
Peak Wayne, yes, Jerry.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, kind of just like extending beyond that, like that that ask conversation and like intentions. Another thing for like setting everyone up for success, and this kind of goes with what Brandy said as well, like you're not gonna have great sex if you just hop into bed together with no preamble. Getting to know each other's vibes obviously helps, and so does having a frank conversation about what is and is not on the table. Communication. Yes, Quill. I actually wrote a write-up for something on afterglow.com about like successful group play planning. Like talk beforehand, come up with a menu that you're all good with, and then you have a lovely buffet laid out that you all know that is going to be a tasty treat for everyone involved.
Yeah,
No
100%.
surprises.
100%. Yeah, Sasha, what would you add to that?
So I was Wayne and Brandy kind of melded together and said the same, kind of the same thing. And I've been on both ends of just like, and I like the unicorn. I just don't like the hunting part, being hunted. But anyway, but as a couple, sometimes couples are a little, like Brandy said, they're just really can be not mindful and thinking of the other person as an object rather than somebody whose desires, opinions, and autonomy and all of those things matter. And so a lot of times it's for couples like in that situation to really sit down and approach whoever you're thinking about approaching in that way to say like, okay, this is a person with feelings and desires, and this is not an object to be used. And just have a lot of consensual talk about it within the three. And as a single person, sometimes couples can be very tone deaf. They really yeah, it's problematic. And so I would say that coming in as a single person or a unicorn to really practice um discernment and practice speaking up for yourself, and that's when you can run into some issues if you're not comfortable speaking up for yourself and advocating for your wants, needs, and your safety in any kind of sexual encounter. So on both sides I've been in it, and it just takes, like Quayle said and Lacey said, communication all the way around.
Yeah, thanks. And some people are also adding from the chat, talk about the type of threesome you plan to have. There's different types of threesome. Some might be centered on one partner or on two or on, everyone kind of being shared in that experience. Someone else said, remember that the person is a whole person, WHOLE, not a whole person, HOLE. And absolutely. Have prearranged safe words and signals in advance. Absolutely. So all of this is really helpful. When the couple, yeah, true story, watch out for couples dehumanizing the third. So absolutely. Yeah. Like I think this is all really, really helpful. Good. All right, folks. Well, I'm looking at the time. We have about 4 minutes left. I'd love to just do one more final question. And in the meantime, guests, feel free to kind of like start thinking about, something that you've learned or that's resonated or that you found interesting along the way. But our last question is, does intimacy equal sex, or can they truly be separated? Does intimacy equal sex, or can they truly be separated? Yeah, yeah, Wayne, Brandy, I see
Yeah.
Jerry.
Yeah. Real quick, I would just say that, intimacy is in so many different ways, right? We have intimate relationships with our friends. So intimacy is definitely separated from sex. We have, we go out with our friends to bars or the club or just hanging out one-on-one. These are platonic friends. That's a very intimate moment. If we start to really understand what intimacy means, then we would see intimacy so differently. So yes, intimacy is separate from sex.
Okay, Brandy, Jerry.
Much like what Wayne said, you can experience intimacy in any dynamic that you have, in any vulnerable relationship that you're going to have, whether it's with your parents, your kids, your friends, anybody. Sex is that sexual gratification, that physical intimacy, that moment of, orgasm, if you do experience it. Very separate, very different. Now, it's kind of like the rectangle and the square thing, right? Like intimacy can be sex, but sex cannot be, or what is it? Sex can be intimacy, but intimacy doesn't have to be sex. There it is.
Yeah,
That.
well said. Jerry, what would you add to that?
I piggyback on what everyone said. The way I like to define it for myself is when I was hooking up, I would not kiss my hookups because I felt like that was too intimate. But you can blow your load in my hole.
Yeah. Sasha, what would you add?
I know one thing that Wayne always says, and I know. Let's just take a moment
I
to
get it
like.
though. I totally get it. Like I totally get that. Sasha, what would you add to that?
I was saying, I know Wayne always says one thing, like, let's celebrate like platonic relationships, and those are super intimate. I always say, like, I have a life partner that's more of a platonic relationship, and I consider that person, who are a life partner, like for life. They're gonna be with me for life, and probably sometimes know even more than my sexual partners. But a lot of it is like responsive desire too. We have to think that it's all contextual too. So you can desire someone's company, desire someone's touch and love and generosity, all of those things without sex. And that's a form of intimacy. So just want to say, Wayne always says, let's celebrate romantic, platonic relationships too as a form of intimacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys. And thank you
Mhm.
everyone for coming tonight. Again, I invite you in the chat to share one thing you learned, something you resonated, someone you enjoyed tonight, or one word that describes how you're feeling currently. We invite you to join us next month, April 21st, as always,
Yes.
third Tuesday of every month for Let's Get Clinical, but Make It Hot. So, sex educators, coaches, and therapists will be breaking down anatomy, arousal, libido, and attachment using plain language and humor. As always, I'll follow up with an email with a feedback form, information about how you can connect with our panelists. We also encourage you to follow us on YouTube and Instagram. I'll send those links to the chat right now. Please, please, please follow us, subscribe to our YouTube. Your appreciation and support, just showing up every month with us, if you're here for the first time or
Yes.
not, just means so much to us as we continue to build and create this space for shame-free and more sex-positive conversations. So thank you again for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you next month for Real Talk with the Sexperts. Until then.